Hello and welcome to the Mindful Entrepreneur Podcast. We're your hosts, Tati and Jerry Jimenez.
Join us as entrepreneurs and brother and sister interview inspiring leaders in different fields to explore how they've achieved results and fulfillment. Let's get started as soul, passion, and business come together at The Mindful Entrepreneur.
Hello, game changers. Today we're here with Arjun Arora. Arjun is currently a partner at 500 Startups, the most active early stage venture firm in the world. He leads the fundraising and investors relationships efforts for the firm. He was a co-founder of Immediately, a mobile platform for modern sales professionals. Prior to Immediately, Arjun was the chairman and founder of ReTargeter, where he bootstrapped the company to be in the top 100 of Inc.'s fastest growing companies in 2013. He's a recognized expert and has been interviewed on Bloomberg TV, quoted by the Wall Street Journal, and been mentioned in Forbes.
He has been recognized in the White House, at the UN, and at the Global Summit for Entrepreneurship for his success and commitment to a values-centered organization. Arjun was previously the head of business development for Yahoo Real Estate. He advises various startup companies in Silicon Valley with strategic planning, monetization, and funding. He's also an angel investor to multiple companies. Arjun graduated from UC Berkeley with a degree in electrical engineering, computer science, and entrepreneurship and technology. So, without further ado, straight from Silicon Valley to give us the inside scoop on what's going on with startups, investors, and his exhilarating journey, here's the man. Arjun, it's such a pleasure to have you as our guest. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you guys. It's excited to be here. So thanks for the opportunity.
So Arjun, it seems that entrepreneurship is something that runs in your blood,
Yeah.
right? Was this inspired by your family as you were growing up?
Yeah, my grandfather was an entrepreneur and he had his own business back in India. And my uncle as well is kind of built a business in the adventure tourism space as well. So I've always kind of been surrounded by it. My father started his own consultancy. And so, kind of been in and around this idea of entrepreneurship and, just kind of taking risks and being adventurous. And so that's something that I've been fortunate to be surrounded by since as long as I can remember.
Got it. And do you consider formal education, given your preparation, do you consider nowadays formal education to be as important as experience, or is it more of a mindset situation? What do you consider are the necessary ingredients to being a great entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think, there's certainly value in a formal education. I think having the foundational elements of, kind of thinking intelligently, thinking constructively, and just being generally well-read and, having a sense of the world through, the work that one does in a college or university or high school or wherever, I think is important. I think there's certainly value to it. And it also creates a common language for people to be able to, converse and conduct business and generally engage in the world. But I think ultimately I am highly partial to experiential learning. And I think that's probably personally definitely true. But I think that's where you really get to learn things. I think you can read about, a business case study in the Harvard Business Review and understand, this is what you should do in this situation. Okay, it all makes sense. But when you actually go there, you live it, you have to face your customers, your employees, understand the challenges of a dwindling bank account, whatever the things are that actually are real in that moment. The learning from that experience is 1,000 times more effective and something that you can then pass on and share much more, eloquently and in a much more impactful way. So ultimately, I think that, experiential knowledge is the most powerful type of knowledge and learning.
And you touched on challenges and overcoming them. What challenges have you faced in your entire journey, and how have you overcome them?
Overcoming challenges, both, in a business capacity or personally or professionally or, whatever it may be, but tons of stuff. So I think, the first thing I can think of that's meaningful is that when I was running BD for Yahoo Real Estate, we had to convince real estate agents who were used to, buying ads in newspapers and magazines to actually start, putting their listings up online, even for free. There wasn't something they had to buy. So that I think is critical and was a meaningful challenge. And then bootstrapping my first company, ReTargeter, we didn't have a lot of cash. So we had to really figure out how can we be as scrappy and efficient and effective as possible in order to grow and scale our company. And so that was a huge challenge, both kind of, intellectual and kind of creative challenge was figuring out how do we scale this business without, a ton of resources. And now I think at 500 Startups, we're building a global platform for early stage investing, and we have massive aspirations. We're not, just comfortable with, 4 folks sitting in an ivory tower on Sand Hill Road and cutting some checks once in a while. We have some pretty massive global aspirations, and so that's a huge challenge to get that right. I mean, our team is massive. We're operating and investing in countries that no one else will touch or even go near. So all of these things I think are massive challenges. And I think it requires just discipline, focus, clarity of vision, and a strong commitment to get things done.
Speaking of 500 Startups, congratulations on your role at 500 Startups.
Thank you.
Yeah. Can you share more about the company's mission and how you see it changing the lives of people, like you said, around the world?
Yeah. So we're building, I think in the easiest way to describe it is we're building the world's kind of largest global early stage investment platform. And what that means is we're investing in companies at the early stage, typically just right around product market fit time. So once people have a couple of customers or, maybe a couple thousand users if they're a consumer company, but someplace where, we've seen that they've done the work to prove out that they have a real business or that at least a real product that people are willing to buy. And then we really help them, go from there, get the capital, the expertise, the relationships that they need to scale that business and turn it into, a real company that could be, properly venture funded or scale, at a kind of hyper growth trajectory. So that's, what we're doing. And I think the way that we're able to really impact folks is by going and investing in places where others, won't go. We recently, went to Africa. We've invested in about 20 plus companies there. We're investing actively in Vietnam, in Southeast Asia, in Turkey, even, given the challenges in the political environment, we're still there. We've got folks on the ground. We're still actively investing. So, I think that's something that we're committed to and excited about is going there. And we firmly believe that entrepreneurship is a vehicle for, growth in economies, growth for people, and kind of as a wealth creation engine is awesome. So that's what we're supporting all over the world.
Yeah. It resonates with us very much because we were very positively surprised when we heard you and Dave McClure, the co-founder, and when you talked about how passionate you both are about encouraging, and about encouraging angel investors and VCs and universities to invest in people at a higher level, way higher level. So awesome, like you said, awesome.
And since you were speaking about going to places that most people don't, I'm speaking here on behalf of women. It seems that there's a huge gap in investing in women in this male-dominated field. So I'm curious, how do you see women succeeding in this environment, and what can we do as a society to help not only women but also minorities?
It's a wonderful question and wonderful point. My wife, was an entrepreneur and is now an executive at a startup, and so it's certainly something that's close to my heart. And also, we as a personal angel investor and advisor, my portfolio over-indexed massively in investing in women, and 500 does the same. And it's something that we're actively cognizant of. We have a team internally that meets regularly to think about how can we bring more female entrepreneurs into the fold. So it's something that we're super passionate about. And I think it's not only the right thing to do, but it's also smart business. And so I think for both those reasons, it makes a lot of sense. So, that being said, as well as minorities and other folks, it's something that we have just made a strong commitment to for, a long time now. It's really built into the fabric of what we do. And I think the best way to really understand that is to look around a venture partnership, look at the team, understand if they actually are diverse, understand if they have folks that are, not just the standard kind of cookie cutter venture model. And so I think, that's a way to truly understand and judge. Look at the portfolio, look at the partnership team, look at the associates and everyone else. And that's a good way to know if people are just, talking or if they're actually walking the walk.
And what could we say to venture capitalists, or how can we inspire more of a global movement?
So one of the things I think that we've done a good job of is we produce a ton of content. So if you go to our blog, if you go to SlideShare, if you go to Twitter, if you go to Dave's Twitter, my Twitter, anywhere else, you're going to see just a ton of content out there that really, we're hoping is educating the market on how to start a company, how to scale a company, how to talk to investors, how to raise capital the right way. And it's something that we're, super passionate about, is just educating the ecosystem as a whole through the content that we produce, and also for angel investors or for corporates or other people involved in the ecosystem, not just limited to founders alone. So I think that's a great place to really start to understand what we've been thinking, what we've been learning for 7 years, what we've been sharing with the world. And so, I would certainly start there as a way to kind of better understand what we're up to and share things. And then I think the other thing is that we're on a plane pretty frequently. We're flying around, we're speaking at conferences, we're, in other locations. And I think that's a good opportunity to connect with someone directly from 500. In most countries, or at least in a country that's relatively close to wherever you are, there's probably someone from 500, swinging by or physically located there, at any given point in time. So I think that's is something, the best way to get a sense is to connect with someone from the team.
Excellent. So now, audience, and for all of us interested, look at the content, do the research, and spread the news that there's a wonderful company out there doing amazing work for entrepreneurs.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, keeping the conversation, this global reach with, 500 startups, now over, I think, more than 60 companies and, more than 1,600 companies that have gone through the program. You, Arjun, get to advise so many companies, and you're privileged in that sense. What are some of the most common challenges people face during that entrepreneurial journey, and how can they overcome them?
Sure. So, a lot of the biggest challenges, at least at the earliest stages, are, people challenges. They're founders that need to learn how to, start and grow a company and what that entails and the commitment that entails and the effort that's required, to make that happen. There are co-founder challenges that happen. But in a more practical or tactical perspective, a lot of times it's just getting the product market fit really right. And I think if you can get that sorted out and you're open to learning and you're open to delegating and bringing in the right people to help you scale, which is non-trivial and not everyone is comfortable doing that. So I don't want to make that sound like it's easy. It does take effort to be able to, do that. But if you can really get the product market fit right, understand who you're trying to target, what you're offering them, what the value proposition is, and have a product that is, in the early days, usually at the stage we invest in, the type of companies we invest in, is relatively simple and solves a problem in an elegant way, you're probably, good to go. But getting all that right is, again, non-trivial. So I think if you can get the product market fit right, you can get a handful of happy customers and you understand why they're happy, and then you can really do the work that you need to do as a founder to hire the right people, to have a good culture, to create a space where people can follow your vision and mission, then you're going to be all right. But again, like I said, none of that is easy. It's hard work.
Sorry to interrupt, but I'm just curious, please. What percentage of companies that you see actually succeed?
Yeah, I'd say about 50% of the companies that we invest in 18 to 24 months are no longer around. So, that's probably closer to 24 to 30 months are no longer around. And so that means, about 2 years after we invest, they're gone. And so that's just a reality of, the early stage startup ecosystem, is that it's really, really tough. It's tough to get the product market fit right. It's tough to be able to scale a business. It's tough to raise downstream capital to enable, yourself to continue to scale. So, all those things are pretty hard. And I'd say, to date, we've seen about, 2.5% of our companies will get to kind of a $500 million valuation or more. And the way the venture, the economics of venture capital work is that's great. If you can do that consistently, you're creating incredible, funds that investors want to invest in. So that's kind of, what we're able to do. But yeah, there's a high failure rate, especially at the stage that we are investing in.
And this is, just to keep in mind, this is after you've invested in a company, which means there's been a vetting process.
Yeah, so I mean, even after having, some early traction, some early customers, it's still difficult to kind of scale and build something that's sustainable.
Which says a lot about the mindset that an entrepreneur needs to have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So if I may, based on that,
Sure.
And you've had valuable experience, what do you say makes a successful entrepreneur?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, the answer that a lot of folks give, but I think is correct, is grit, kind of an unwillingness to give up, and just kind of continuing to move forward every day, regardless of how difficult the situation is. Just getting up in the morning and putting one foot in front of the other and keep moving forward. I think that, combined with kind of an insatiable desire to learn, is really important. So you can get up and kind of walk forward every day, but if you're walking in the wrong direction, or if it's drudgery or not fun, you need to do that sometimes for short periods of time. But if you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, if you're not learning, or if you're not heading in the right direction, then that's just masochistic, or that's not fun. So what you want to do is you want to be able to survive those moments, but you want to be able to continue to move in the positive direction. So I think that combination of both, for lack of a better term, survivability and a kind of a push towards a larger vision of something that's much greater, and holding those two things at once, and the cognitive dissonance required to do that is kind of, in my opinion, what makes a great founder. It's hard,
Yeah.
but it's doable.
It's doable.
Yeah. And, what I heard, correct me if I'm wrong, I heard a couple of things. One, you need to be humble and learn. You need to kind of, make sure that nobody knows all the answers, and sort of you have to kind of know that up front. But I like the other part that I heard was, how do you make it fun? At least for me, doing something has to be fun. And it reminded me that in the Harvard Business Review, you wrote an article and you talked about the unspoken rule in Silicon Valley. But if employees want to show their commitment to companies, they need to sleep under their desk. And
Yeah.
I think you call it their martyr capitalism.
Martyr capitalism. Yeah.
Since we're talking about, as companies are scaling, being able to delegate and hire, and do you have any suggestions for leaders on how to manage in a more mindful, balanced way?
Yeah. So I think ultimately the way to run, the way in which you get this sort of weird behavior where people are sleeping under their desks and not doing things right, is when you don't have clarity on where you're going, and you don't have clarity on how you operate. So I think the best way to do that is actually be very, very clear on what the priorities are, and very clear on how you as an organization are going to work. And I think if you do those two things right, then you can get a tremendous amount of things done, in 8, and let's say, because it's startup land, maybe 10 or even 12 hours, but it's not 16 or 18 hours, right? And I think that it still requires hard work, and it still requires dedication, but there's a natural bound to, the amount of energy and effort that someone can put in and be effective. So I think understanding, that energy and managing that energy is really important. So kind of energy management is critical. Long story short, I think the way to actually not have to get into that situation is to be abundantly clear on how the company is operating, what your goals are, setting up the systems for success so that people can collaborate, allowing people to make decisions quickly that need to be made so that they're not doing work that is perfunctory, not aligned to kind of what the goals are. And you see this all the time. I mean, in organizations, nobody's perfect. There's areas of dysfunction. There's lack of communication. There's kind of political infighting. There's mismatched incentives. There's all these things that lead to, this weird situations where people feel like they've got to keep hustling it out or grinding or just not be in a healthy environment. So, finding, I think, alignment from leadership, alignment from the VCs down to leadership, down all the way through to everybody who's working on the business is super important. The best companies have a incredibly clear vision, know what it takes to do that, and go after it.
Thank you. And in the early stages, how does a company get that clarity? I mean, a lot of the early part seems to me that it's figuring it out.
Sure. Yeah, and I think no, it's a great question. I think you can even get clarity in the fact that you are still in the phase of figuring it out, right? I think that's kind of the beautiful thing is you can say, well, we're kind of in the wandering through the desert phase. We're trying to figure out what's working, what's not, and we're acknowledging that we're here right now in this space, and so let's we know that every day we're going to try a bunch of experiments. We're going to talk to 10 customers. We're going to try and learn. We're going to synthesize all this data at the end of the week, and we're going to see are we a bit closer to where we feel like there's strong product market fit. Are our customers saying this? Are they willing to pay for it? Are people converting much easier on our conversion pages because we've got the right messaging and we've sold the right features? And having some sense of, I think when we get this right, this is what it's going to look like. Okay, people will convert faster. Our customers will be happy. They'll tell us they're happy. So I think you can even have clarity even in those phases. And I think if you're a first-time entrepreneur, it's helpful to have advisors, investors, just friends who've been through it, whatever it takes to kind of help you figure out what that might look like. And there's a ton of great content online, and there's all these things that you can look to. But I think at any phase in a startup's trajectory, you can, if you've done the right work and have the right people around you, you can figure out what the right milestones for that phase are, even if they're a little bit amorphous.
Yeah, great. You talked about, thank you for sharing that. You talked about having mentors and making sure, obviously to us, that's very important because they can tip the scale in a very positive way. Yeah. And I'm wondering, who has been an influence to you, and do you have any mentors now?
Yeah, I guess my approach is interesting. Is I feel like I can really try, and I try every day to learn from everybody and learn through every interaction, and that's kind of my approach. But I've been fortunate to learn from some incredible people, and through various communities like Summit Series or the Renaissance Weekend or other events or conferences that I've been to. I feel like I get the opportunity to learn from awesome people. But some folks that I deeply respect in the ecosystem, Naval Ravikant, who's the CEO of AngelList, who's got a phenomenal Twitter page that's worth engaging with. Adam Jackson is a incredible serial entrepreneur, somewhat under the radar, just a phenomenal operator. There's another person that I feel fortunate to call a friend and who I've learned from. So there Michael Birch. There's so many people that have done and built things in the ecosystem. But my goal is really to be able to learn from everybody and from every experience. But to the extent that you can find investors, advisors, mentors, and I named a few, but it's incredibly powerful.
Great. I like your answer. Very mindful, very present, being very present and learning in the moment. It's interesting. Without a doubt, you have been very successful in various fields. And with all those accomplishments, I'm wondering, what do you consider to be your biggest success so far?
That's a great question. I just feel like continuing to engage in this in the startup ecosystem and just learning more and more every day about how this world operates, how capital flows, how companies get started. I think bootstrapping ReTargeter was awesome. I think it was an incredible story, and we built a phenomenal culture. And I was talking to somebody that I knew from back in those days, and he mentioned that as well to me, and I'm deeply grateful that that's the impression that was left from that experience, was that we built a great culture and that people were excited about working there. And so that to me is one great success. I think obviously working on the 500 platform and helping to scale this mission globally has been incredibly impactful, and I think wonderful to be working on. But I think just keep learning every day and kind of maintaining that intellectual curiosity and quest for kind of seeking new adventures. That's probably what I consider to be my greatest success.
Great, thanks.
Yeah. That's awesome. And we're wrapping it up, just being mindful of your time. But I'm also wondering, what do you do? I saw an article that you wrote regarding the warriors, the travel warriors and you do a lot of traveling yourself. What do you
Yeah.
do to take care of yourself for your well-being,
It's
to
a
balance it all out? And do
Yeah.
you believe in work-life balance?
Yeah.
I'm
Good question.
curious.
Sure. What I do is, I typically go to when I'm in San Francisco, and I do travel quite a bit, but, when I'm in the city, I go to the gym before lunch, and it's been something I've been doing for 7 years and try and stay super, I am very regular about that. So I think that's important. In the morning, I'll typically walk to the office. I'm fortunate not to live too far, and I'll usually take a couple of phone calls. So I'll catch up with entrepreneurs. I'll catch up with, other folks in the ecosystem, and it's about a 45-minute to an hour walk, and so I get to have a couple conversations there. And that's a nice way for me to kind of start the day, because I get to connect with people, but also be outside and walk, and so that's helpful for me personally. And I usually try and leave the office by 6 or 7 and go meet or connect with somebody or go to an event or something where just outside of the office environment. It's typically still work related in some capacity, but it's at least kind of making the effort to step out of the office. And I think that's important. So that, those are little things, and just traveling, just try and be, thoughtful about, not taking red eyes or, trying to, and sometimes it's necessary. And, I've done a 6-hour turnaround trip to the East Coast. I've done stuff like that because it's necessary, but, trying to the best of my ability, avoid doing things like that, when it's not needed. And so that, I think, those little acts of self-care, I think, are critical. But I think you can still lead a fulfilling life if you enjoy what you do, if you're mission driven, and if you learn to take care of yourself in the right way through whatever means that, that might be. And so I think that this idea of, work-life balance for people who are building hyper-growth, venture-funded, scalable companies is somewhat unrealistic, at least for the first few years, because it is a commitment that you have to make to yourself and to your team and to your investors. But that being said, I don't think you can still find a way to enjoy your life, right? I think the large part of the reason why people think about work-life balance, to be thoughtful about that, is that people assume that you're not enjoying your life, or you're not taking care of yourself, or you're not you're putting yourself in a bad place, and that work is bad. But I don't think that's necessarily true. I think if you design your life in the right way, you can have both a very fulfilling work life and a personal life, even if for the first few years you are working more than you're doing other things. So I think that there's another term that's called work-life integration. I hesitate to use that because sometimes that's what folks use to just make people work all the time. But I think if you do that in a thoughtful way, if you're clear about, taking care of yourself, taking care of your team, create space for enjoyment, create space for personal time, you can get a lot done, and still, enjoy your life without killing yourself. So, a lot of different thoughts there, but something to take into consideration.
One last question. What is the next big dream you'd like to conquer?
That's great. Well, I think, right now, just being at 500 and working on the mission that we have. And I think, continuing to raise more capital for the firm, allowing us to invest in more companies all over the world, and to help companies scale as well. I think, today we've typically written checks in the earlier stages of a company, but over time, I think we can continue to be more involved through the trajectory of a business. So, what that looks like, I'm not sure, but, being able to continue to be helpful, invest in many companies all over the world, and help a lot of founders and their teams, create something that's powerful and impacts a lot of people sounds like a big challenge and a lot of fun. So that's what's next.
That's great. Arjun, thank you for being here. It was certainly a very enjoyable conversation, and we hope to have you back at some point if we can.
Yeah, definitely.
Hey, and before you leave, both the Genius Spot and Be the Factor want to thank you, our awesome audience, for being part of our podcast. And if you found this episode of value, please share it with your friends and loved ones so they too can join the Mindful Entrepreneur.